4.
Numero quattro.
Okay. So, my number 4 is London Calling by The Clash. This album was released on the 14th of December 1979. It contains 19 songs and it's over an hour long. That first track, the album's namesake, London Calling, I would say it just demands that you kind of sit up and listen to it. It's kind of part of the reason why I've chosen it as my ringtone on my phone. The album as a whole is probably more innovative than a lot of the punk albums in inverted commas that were getting released at the time. There's a lot of kind of different sounds in this album. For example, you've got likes of Jimmy Jazz, which is the 4th song in the album, which initially sounds like quite a stripped back and kind of simple composition, but then round about the kind of 1.5 minute mark, you've got a kind of horn section that kind of come in, and it just works really well. But it's probably unprecedented at the time for kind of bands like The Clash to kind of introduce stuff like that. Similarly, you've got the likes of Hateful, Rudy Can't Fail, and Revolution Rock that have this kind of big reggae rock influence that just works really well with kind of Joe Strummer's raw and raspy kind of vocal aesthetic that you can't help but just kind of bop your head along to and have a wee dance. There's also some really experimental numbers as well, which I think were probably quite ahead of their time, to be honest. Guns of Brixton, which was a composition that was written by Paul Simonon, who is the band's bassist. It's interesting that you mentioned Damon Albarn's Gorillaz, because he's played with them on a couple of occasions. And Damon Albarn and Paul Simonon were part of a band called The Good, the Bad and the Queen.
Okay.
I just know of them. I haven't actually listened to any of their material, but it's interesting given what this song's purely written by Paul Simonon, and then he's obviously later went on to do stuff with the Gorillaz, which are quite experimental, I suppose. In fact, this song was later sampled by Cypress Hill.
Nice.
In their song What's Your Number, and it also features Tim Armstrong, which is the kind of lead vocalist from the band Rancid. And this was back in 2004. I don't know if they necessarily sample it, but Tim Armstrong's clearly playing the riff from Guns of Brixton. Like, it's undeniable. It's Guns of Brixton. It's got this kind of sharp guitar riff that runs throughout the course of the song, but there's also these kind of weird, I've described it as kind of weird and odd plinky plonky guitar sounds. It genuinely sounds as if they're just twanging the kind of guitar strings.
These sort of harmonics or something.
Yeah, I don't know if it's even as technical as that. It does just sound kind of like, really twangy, I suppose, is the kind of best way to kind of describe it. When it kind of precede the chorus of the song, and it's all about kind of guns and gang culture, and that's a theme that kind of pops up throughout the course of the album, as well as just kind of London life in general. Standout tracks for me are, of course, London Calling. As I said, it just kind of demands that you kind of listen to.
That's the Clash song that everybody knows as well, London Calling.
Absolutely. There's Rudy Can't Fail. Again, I mentioned that earlier on. Kind of there's this kind of reggae influence to it. Interestingly, when we went to see the Specials at the Barrowlands a couple of months ago now, probably about 3-4 months ago, they were supported by a band called the Tut Tuts, and they did a version of Rudy Can't Fail. It's worth kind of checking out on YouTube or Spotify.
Yes.
Spanish Bombs as well, which sings about the Spanish Civil War. So I suppose that kind of distracts from London life. It is specifically about the Spanish Civil War, and the chorus is sung in Spanish. The Card Cheat, which is just a masterpiece. It's either Paul Simonon or Mick Jones. It's certainly not Joe Strummer singing this song, and it's a piano piece. It's a piano number, and it's really good. I mean, similar to a lot of the kind of bands and albums that we've covered, it's like listening to a bit of prose, and I really like it. You've got Guns of Brixton, which I mentioned earlier on, and the last song on the album, Train in Vain, which you might not know the album title, but you've probably heard it at some point. It's got this kind of dead, funky vibe that you can't help but kind of shuffle along to. Yeah, I don't really have all that much more to say about London Calling other than, I suppose it's the band moving away from their early kind of punk origins
Yeah.
into kind of new and experimental territory, and it's executed very well. So yeah, well worth a listen.
Nice. Okay, so it's London Calling by The Clash.